Hi YouTubers, it's George in the garage. Sun's out, it's a much better day, it's a bit warmer as well, and I thought I'd go over the dimensions of this magnetic loop aerial, and so if people want to make one, and this seems to work well for me. There's lots of information on YouTube relating to making these, and I thought I'd like to go over the dimensions of my magnetic loop antenna, so if anybody wants to make one. The actual diameter of the main section is 1 meter. The actual loop section here, the diameter of that is 300 millimeters. Now the spacing, let's get my notepad. This dimension here is 130 millimeters, and that's just heat shrink sleeving, and it actually goes right the way through here. And I've got some extra plastic insulators because this is isolated from this winding or this coil. The gap here between there and there is 12 millimeters, and the gap there is 20 millimeters, and the same there. This between here and here is how you can adjust the SWR, and it has to, because this is like the primary winding and that's the secondary, and the same in both cases. The copper tube goes all the way through in both cases. There is a gap here where the coaxial goes, and the gap there is 40 millimeter. Now where the capacitor goes at the bottom, this is the main, like the primary winding. Here's the coax running up to it. The main gap here at the bottom, again, this doesn't go all the way through, as you can imagine. It just pokes into this wood. The gap between there and there for the capacitor is 65 millimeters, and I think the tube itself, or the wooden rod, is 40 millimeters, and it doesn't go right the way through here either, as you can imagine, because the inner of the coax goes to that one and that, so it's like a shorted primary turn, and that's about it really. And so I've got it mounted on a tripod. I can't remember the value of the capacitors here. I don't think they were marked. I think it was just something I had line about, but there's two. This one's the smaller value and it's in parallel with the big value one, so it's like the fine trimmer. The actual clip here adds another capacitor there in parallel with the other capacitors, and that's for the 40 meter band, and this currently is set up for the 20 meter band, and it tunes in very well. And I'll just stand it back up again, it being in the garage, and we've got the washing out at the moment, so I can't really put it down the garden. Plus I can't remember where the coaxial cable I've put is, you know, a longer length. Well, I had this brilliant idea. Let me just turn this down, I'll switch it off. I had this brilliant idea with my magnetic loop aerial, is to do away with the variable capacitors here and have fixed capacitors, and then have a bank of relays and some control way of doing it, so I could switch in the capacitors remotely, so I could mount this permanently outside once I've waterproofed it, and have it for a directional HF aerial. So I came up with the idea of, first of all, measuring, tune the capacitors, the variable ones, to the frequency I want, and peak the Q of the aerial, disconnect the capacitors, measure the capacitance, and then make up a fixed value capacitor or capacitors to the same value of what the variable was set to. Right, I've done that several times now, and when I connect the fixed capacitors on, it doesn't work because it's off tune. So I've put it back with the variable capacitors, set it up again, measured the capacitance, set up some fixed value capacitors to equal the value of the variable capacitors. Does it work? No. So I'm really not sure what I'm doing wrong. I just don't know why, because the idea is these capacitors here, these variable ones, are not high voltage ones, and if I run a few watts more than what I normally run, you can hear them fizzling, flashing over. So the idea is to use high voltage capacitors, fixed value, and have them switched in by relay. But it's not working. I'm scratching my head here, and I don't know why. Whether it's off by a couple of picofarad and that is enough to detune it, I don't know. So I'm puzzled, really puzzled by it all. Length of the wires, maybe the capacitance meter's giving me false readings. Don't know. Got to look into it a bit more detail, I think. Hi YouTubers, back in the garage. It's raining. My idea, I'm not sure it's going to work. Two capacitors on this magnetic loop, fine tune and main tune capacitors, but I wanted to be able to transmit more power, so it means buying high power capacitors or high voltage capacitors. So I thought an easier solution was to, once I've got the settings I need on here, is to measure the capacitance of these two capacitors and then make up fixed value capacitors and then have them switched in. So I could have one there for 7.2 meg or one 7.3 or 7.15 or 14.2, and just switch whichever capacitor is on the frequency I'm using. So I'll have like a bunch of capacitors on my common frequency I use. But so far I've measured the capacitance here and I've found some capacitors that match the same value, but when I fit the capacitors on here, it doesn't work. It could be my capacitance meter is not very good. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to connect my Nano VNA and go up and down looking at the SWR to see what frequencies it does actually cover first, and then I'm going to make a decision when I splash out on capacitors. But I need to find a way of measuring the value of these capacitors more accurately, which I don't know how to do it with the VNA. I assume it is possible. Okay, done some more tests, and I've just had my first RF burn off this aerial, running 3 watts. God, you wouldn't think it, would you? 3 watts. I just caught my finger on this metal frame with this capacitor, and it tingled. Oh, anyway, done some more tests with the capacitance. Still can't get the capacitance right, but I'll tell you what the SWR was across the bands as much as I can. 6.4 meg SWR of 2, 7.2 meg 1.77, 7.6 meg 1.7, with the extra capacitor taken out, 7.6 meg 1.5 SWR, etc. And then I went up the band, 8.1 meg SWR 1.5, 11 meg, nearly 12 meg, 1.7. These are all SWR readings. And then I've done a quick view of me scanning up the 20 meter band, which is my favourite band. I'm just going to show you this. This is scanning from 14 to 15 megahertz, and it's an SWR on the Nanovna. And alright, I'm standing near the aerial, but it goes from there, it goes from an SWR of, let's have a look, so it's 1.9 at the moment, and this is indoors in the garage. And as I tune the capacitor, you can see I can move the dip right across, so from 14 to 15 with the same SWR, going backwards and forwards like that. So that's 15 and that's 14. Now I can do a fine tuning. Whoops, it's gone off the scale. Put it in the middle. If I adjust this one, I can also lock a fine adjustment, and it will go lower than that, the SWR, just by me tuning it. So if I turned it at that angle, away from the metal vise, it's got an SWR of, what is it? That's 1.5, just by turning the aerial on its axis, because I've got a metal vise here, and that's really good SWR, isn't it? Now you can see I can move it all right up and down that band. So will it do any better? That's the thing. So let's go from 14 to 15 meg. Yeah, quite pleased with that. And it dips all the way up the band, which is pretty good. And in the garage with lots of metal and the vise, it does affect the SWR, but I can get it down to about 1.2 across the 20 meter band, and I can get it to 1.5 across the 40 meter band by just tuning these capacitors. So it looks like I'm going to leave it where it is, but I'm just picking up FT8 at the moment on the loop, and it's very directional. Alright, let's go up the band. Turn the ammeters on. That buzzing is my light in the garage, because right near that ball. Let me switch it off. That's better. Buzzy's gone now. Don't know what that is. They're on and off, these guys. I don't know what the hell that is.
Stand by please, in the Sierra Tango, in the Sierra Tango. Mike 7, Kilo Sierra Tango, hello, nice to meet you for the first. You're 5 and now with me in the clear. My name is Fabio, Fox Alpha Bravo in the off, kick yourself.